Over to you.
Thank you, Amrita, for the kind introduction. Good afternoon. I remember having spoken at a faculty development program or an FDP. This was on language, literature and value-based education, current trends, organized by the Department of English, School of Humanities, and this was in June 2022, and the talk was online. So this is my first visit to Swami Vivekananda University, Barrackpore. I'm delighted to be here physically. It's evident from the smile on my face, I'm sure. And I thank the organizers for making me a part of the celebration of World Theatre Day, 27th March. My greetings to the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Subroto Kumar De, who's the patron, the Registrar, Professor Dr. Pinak Paninath, the Deputy Registrar, Shri Abhishek Dhar, who emailed me a very warm invite. My greetings also to the dignitaries on the dais and all the luminaries here, including Thespian Probir Guho, the cynosure of all eyes today, because everything is centered around him. And my regards also to the wonderful audience. Is it alright if I don't speak on the podium? So, yeah. I prefer to be seen and heard, of course. So, Guho refers to the kind of theatre that we usually watch as the Upen Badiyacho type, where as the curtain rises, one sees a drawing room with 2 to 4 windows, 2 doors, and a girl who is engaged in household chores. A man yells from outside, "Upen Badiyacho!" And a very docile and a polite girl whose father Upen has gone to the bazaar calls him in, her father's friend, and they begin conversing very cordially. You said that. Interestingly, in one of the Mohini Mohan Bhattacharya Memorial Lectures held at the University of Calcutta, Nasiruddin Shah spoke of the English theatre as still performed in schools and colleges in India. Shah said that when the curtain rises, one gets to see an expensive sofa set or a settee, a recliner, a chest of drawers, very British, and a fireplace, right? I taught in a women's college for many years, and I used to co-direct plays in the annual function. And Monu Datta's son, Probal Datta, he and his team, they used to get this set ready for years on end. The question is why? What was I doing? We could not put up plays by Pinter. We could not put up plays about the angry young. We could not also put up absurd drama. We were told nobody would like it. Nobody would understand. I also had to conform to the traditional, conventional, conservative English theatre with a fireplace. There you go. But I'm not going to talk about the plays with fireplaces. I'm not going to talk about the plays which Guho refers to as the Upen Badiyacho types. So I will say a few words about alternative theatre, the kind of theatre that Probir Guho practices. Why alternative theatre? In his book titled Other Theatres, Andrew Davies states that again and again, alternative and experimental drama has anticipated changes and innovations which only took place later within mainstream theatre. So in Britain, there are groups like the Suffragettes Actresses Franchise League. You have group theatre, you have unity theatre or the ABCA play unit. And he adds that among big names that attract readers, there are figures such as William Cobbett, William Morris, and names much more familiar like George Bernard Shaw, W.B. Yeats, W.H. Auden, Joan Littlewood. So, alternative theatre, experimental theatre, fringe theatre, or other theatre, whatever you call it, it always evades neat categorization. Do you agree? Yes. So, one thing is for sure, Davies says, it is non-commercial. That is, theatre whose primary objective is something other than the making of a financial profit. Alternative and experimental theatre is often didactic and mostly humorless. With all due apologies to Professor Guo, I do agree, absolutely humorless. But the question is, why are they humorless? Because such theatres are not meant for entertainment. So, alternative and experimental theatre is often didactic, mostly humorless. There is an emphasis on the message at the expense of entertainment. The other side of the Atlantic. In American alternative theatre, Theodore Shand says that the social upheaval in the United States during the 1960s and early 1970s not only gave rise to a new cultural movement outside the dominant culture, it also spawned an alternative theatre. And initially, the new theatre was expressive of those who aligned themselves with the various social movements of the time. What were they? We are going back to the 60s and 70s. So they included civil rights, free speech, the hippie question, anti-nuclear protests, anti-Vietnam War protests, ecology, feminist issues, gay issues. It was an alternative to the theatre of the dominant, complacent, middle-class society which tended to perpetuate the status quo in aesthetics, politics, working methods and techniques. So they began to work on new working methods, new techniques, new aesthetic principles that were in harmony with their convictions. Unlike the commercial theatres, they are not primarily concerned, you see the same thing that Andrew Davis says. They were not primarily concerned with entertainment as a product to be sold. No, far from it. They were anxious to prove the quality of life for themselves and their audiences. Moments back, I spoke about the theatre of the absurd. You see, the theatre of the absurd has reflected the philosophical alienation of the individual. Alternative theatre tends to reflect the commitment of the group. The traditional theatrical spaces are economically unfeasible and artistically unsuitable. I request each member of the audience to keep this at the back of your minds. Because a few minutes later, once again, I'll come back to this concept of spaces. So, if you have a typical, space with stage and auditorium, this dictates a particular performer-spectator relationship unacceptable to many artists like Guo, and that is entirely on aesthetic grounds, and because the arrangement hinders the development of the community spirit. See, I've spoken about the group, I've also spoken about community spirit. So this shows that those who practice alternative theatre have leftist leanings. However, the most important changes are the development of an autonomous creative method, a shift from the dominance of words to a visual emphasis. It would be interesting to know what Pier Paolo Pasolini said about alternative theatre. I think Guo was much influenced by Pasolini and his ideas. So Pasolini published a manifesto for a new theatre in Nuovi Argomenti. This was 1968. He said, this is very interesting, the theatre one expects, even if one expects total novelty, can never be what one expects. If one expects a new theatre, one does so necessarily within the confines of the ideas one already holds. Good Lord. If that was so, he asks, who would be the audience of the new theatre? He replies, the new theatre will not be directed towards the bourgeoisie, who generally constitute the audience, but instead towards the advanced elements of the bourgeoisie. Ladies in expensive mink coats are expected not to enter, he says. And jokingly he says that if they really do, looking forward to, a typical commercial theatre, they would be charged 30 times extra, 30 times more. He welcomes a few thousand intellectuals in the city whose cultural interests may be provincial, but they have to be real, he said. He wants progressives and radicals, he said. The new theatre chooses to define itself in the same banal, formal report style as word theatre. This is interesting. He said that word theatre is incompatible both with traditional theatre and purposefully anti-traditional theatre, which means that it had to be absolutely radical. So there would be a necessary restriction in order to better understand the words spoken. And Pasolini said, the ideas would be the real characters in this kind of theatre. So there would be a total absence of scenic action, and obviously the total disappearance of staging. So you would not need good costumes, you would not need lights, sets, props, and definitely not the fireplace. A particular type of alternative theatre flourished in Poland. You'll understand why I'm focusing on Poland. Of course, one reason I cannot go on talking about alternative theatre is practiced in all parts of Europe because of the paucity of time and because I don't know that much. Simple. Right. So a particular type of alternative theatre flourished in Poland during the period from the 1950s to the fall of communism in 1989. Polish alternative theatre came into being during the period directly preceding the historical event known as the Polish October in 1956. The October was a result of a complex sequence of circumstances, starting with a communist takeover at the end of the Second World War and ending with the installation of an anti-Stalinist Władysław Gomułka as head of state. So this not only manifested a change in government, but also a transition point. What kind of a transition point? A transition in the relationship of creative intellectuals to the party-state apparatus. This new skepticism brought about the beginning of Polish alternative theatre. So this movement had striking resemblances to American, British and other alternative theatres of the 1960s, 70s and 80s. But it also developed in a way unique to the communist bloc. And here is Probir Guho, who is accepted an invitation from Jerzy Marian Grotowski's institution. It is called the Theatre Laboratorium and it was funded by the Polish government. So, needless to say, Guho learned much from Grotowski and his institution. So here in Bengal, we have Probir Guho, who keeps on experimenting. Some time ago in Kerala, he conducted a workshop in which participants were asked to find their own spaces to perform. Remember, I asked you to keep the word spaces at the back of your minds. And in an interview, Guho said, some found, I quote, some found a corner in a room, some performed on the rooftop, some under a tree, some on a treetop. And there were those, while there were those who chose the toilet. Suddenly there appeared so many possibilities, so many spaces which they had never thought of until then. Unquote. And another space where one can always perform is the open street. Professor Guho has performed numerous street plays over the years. Simply because street plays can be put up anywhere. So Guho refers to his theatre as Shohojia theatre. The root word, as you can understand, is a derivative of the word Shohoj, which means simple in Bangla. And needless to say, he uses theatre to protest. For Guho, Shohojia is an alternative way of doing theatre. So very soon, we will watch the documentary on Guho and that will explain much more. And today morning, I received a WhatsApp message from him which said that we will continue to give voice to the voiceless through our alternative living theatre. I hope he continues to do so as long as he lives. Thank you.